Welcome to Remarkable Retail Podcast, the only podcast hosted by two of the NRF's top retail voices. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
On this episode, our guests live from the Narvar podcast studio at the NRF Big Show, Jack Stratten, Director, Insider Trends. Insider Trends is a global retail trend-setting agency based in London. And back on the pod, Kevin Ervin Kelley, Principal and Co-founder, Shook Kelley, a behavioral architect and author of Irreplaceable, How to Create Extraordinary Places That Bring People Together. Now, in addition to both being fellow NRF top retail experts, you can't see the forest for the trees on this episode. We are focusing on modern, powerful store design and architecture and understanding what works. Steve, when we walk stores together, you and I've got a pretty good eye for innovation and effectiveness at the store level. Jack and Kevin take that understanding, I think, to a whole new level on this episode.
Yeah, well, Kevin's been on before, and I think our commentary after we got done with that was we could talk to that guy for hours because he's just got so much insight and just a really great way of talking through what works in stores. And Jack, who I met for the first time, I guess, last year, and I've been following his work for quite a long time. He's got a great Substack. He's just scanning the globe, literally, for interesting trends in store design. What are the most remarkable retailers? Who's doing interesting things? So yeah, we were so lucky to get the two of them together. They had not met in person before. That's another kind of fun thing when we do some of these interviews, is just getting people together who maybe haven't met each other, but know each other and respect each other, or like we had with last week's episode, two guys who know each other, but it's just fun to riff with them. People will not only enjoy the interview because it's super entertaining, but it's also super insightful.
Now, as I mentioned for this interview, and a few before and a few to follow, we were thrilled to have the support of Narvar, who created for us a podcasting studio. So let's give Narvar some podcasting love. Who is Narvar, you ask? Narvar transforms every post-purchase interaction into loyalty-building moment. With Iris powering predictive intelligence and personalization, brands, retailers, and merchants can create seamless, tailored experiences that foster trust and deepen customer connections. Learn more at narvar.com. All right, we got a lot to get through and a wonderful interview coming up, and we'll also, of course, get to what the remarkable story of the week and what's around the corner. But let's right now get into the news of the week. And I loved your note because it was kind of the tale of two cities, right? I mean, you've got both Bentonville and Minnesota in the news today, both with big milestones. Talk about what you're thinking.
Well, we talked about both of these events previously on the podcast, but last week, both Walmart and Target have new CEOs. As you said, there's really inheriting, so to speak, two different situations. Walmart, of course, has been firing on all cylinders. I expect when we hear from them in a couple of weeks with their quarterly earnings, it'll be a pretty good report. Target, unfortunately, has been really struggling, in particular, the last several years. For people that want to get a somewhat deeper dive, in last week's Substack, I did talk about not only a big milestone for Walmart, which is they hit the $1 trillion market cap. I think there are, well, it depends on the day, but around 11 companies of any kind that have over $1 trillion market caps. That's pretty darn impressive. Target, unfortunately, has seen their stock price decline quite a lot. I think close to 40% over the last 5 years or so. We shall see what these two new leaders are up to. But yes, one definitely comes at it, John Furner, with a running start. And then Michael Fidelki, or Fidelki, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce his last name, has a big task ahead. So we'll see what happens with their earnings. But like I said, I think Walmart's will be quite great. Target, probably not so much.
Speaking of earnings, let's turn our mind to earnings from the last week. Let's start with Amazon. Big news always, and always lots to unpack. Let's start there.
Yeah, well, the earnings are now starting to come fast and furious. So for the most part, what we've been getting over the last week or so has been retailers that have a calendar year reporting. So we're getting November, December in this quarter. So it's both a glimpse into the holiday as well as just how they're performing overall. And then we've got a couple more weeks where we'll get the January ending retailers. So stay tuned for that. We'll be unpacking those over the next month. But anyway, Amazon, another big quarter. Wall Street was a bit disappointed. I think as we're recording this, the stock is down a decent amount. It appears to be not so much the operating results, but the massive amount of money in capital expenditures they've got going. So Wall Street was expecting about 150 billion, which seems like an incredibly big number to me, but it was actually closer to 200 billion. Now, this would be both building out data centers for AWS, but also fulfillment and just other things to keep the whole business going. I think the concern here, and we're not an investment podcast, so won't spend too much time on it, but I think the overall concern is somewhat tied up in the AI bubble fears that has affected the market more broadly recently, but also just, is this a massive land grab where so many companies, Alphabet, well, we don't know too much about exactly what OpenAI and some of the private companies are spending, but clearly there's just this massive build out. And is there an ROI there, or is this just, one or two companies are really going to win out and everybody else is going to get crushed? So I think that's behind it. But if we dig into the operating part, and I'll spend most of my time on the retail piece, but just to mention AWS, 24% growth year over year. That is an acceleration in their growth on a massive base. So I just keep coming back to these huge companies putting up these huge numbers. It's just so impressive. The very profitable ads business, which some people say is probably just about as profitable as AWS if you were able to break it out, which unfortunately Amazon doesn't really allow you to do that. But that business is up 23%. Again, big base. They're like 70% of the retail media business and continue to grow and gain share. First party retail, so this is where Amazon is buying the product and reselling it, more kind of traditional retail, up 10%. That's at least twice as fast as the industry average. Third party, so this is where they're providing the fulfillment services on the marketplace, up 11%. So third party continues to grow its relative share of the retail business, though it's a little bit hard to tell, not to get in the weeds too much, but third party revenues is what Amazon gets paid to fulfill those orders. It's not the gross merchandise value. So you can't exactly tie this to kind of comp sales. It's close, and people try to estimate it, but Amazon does not report that number exactly. Physical retail, which this would have included Amazon Fresh and Amazon Go, though they're very tiny. As we talked about last week, they're closing those, but they would have still been in this number. Physical retail slowed to 5%. That number's been more like 9% the last several quarters. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but that is Whole Foods Market mostly. Still a pretty solid number, but not as good as it has been. And then just kind of for completeness, just to remind people what's all in the Amazon ecosystem is subscriptions, which is Prime, but some other, the studios part and all, up 14%. So again, you have this massive, massive company that is putting up, for the most part, double-digit growth when the rest of the industry is, pretty happy with 4 or 5 for sure. Just a couple other quick things I want to point out. We talked about this story previously. Part of what's in this number and presumably driving some of this growth is they have expanded same-day grocery delivery to 2,300 cities. So we talked about that in the past, and so far, I guess that seems like it's working out pretty well for them. But the other thing that I noted is that perishable products, which is historically not where Amazon has had any strength, because they really didn't offer it for the most part other than through Whole Foods and Amazon Fresh stores, which is, again, minor part of the business. Perishables made up 9 out of the 10 top most ordered items where the service is available. So again, we don't know what that is really to the total, but given the number of cities where this is being offered, which covers a lot of the U.S., starting to get that kind of traction, I think, is super impressive. So we'll see where that goes. And the last thing I had to mention is, so this overall growth of 14%, employee growth, 1%. So they are driving a lot of productivity. How much of this is AI related, robotics related, unclear, but the ability to drive that kind of growth with basically adding almost no people is pretty impressive.
Let's move on from Amazon. Let's talk about a luxury performance bifurcation. Start with Ralph Lauren.
Yeah, just really quickly, just point to a couple, because it really, again, does get back to this bifurcation. Overall, we've talked about in the predictions, we've talked about a few times, the luxury industry kind of gasping for air, but Ralph Lauren, a big player, revenues up 12%, and that's a 9% comp. Net income up 22%. So, even though they're faced with some tariff headwinds, they seem to be able to drive that to the bottom line. And part of the thing that seems to be going on is their average unit retail was up 18%. So they appear to be passing, whether this is mixed strategic moves or whatever, but presumably some of that is to offset the tariff costs. And that seems to be working out pretty well for them. So I think this is a great example of a brand that's got that brand power and that pricing power where they're not necessarily as affected as some others that maybe not have that differentiation. And then kind of related, Tapestry, which is mostly Coach, and that's the best performing part of their portfolio. The Coach business, again, a brand that's been around forever, that's gone through various cycles of reinvention, 25% growth. Now, they are opening some stores, but a lot of that is comp. And they swung from a loss to profits. So again, they don't, to the extent tariffs are affecting them, I think they called out that is not an insignificant number. They've been able to move the business forward. And then, kind of luxury adjacent, I guess, or at least sort of fashion adjacent, ELF, Elf Beauty. We've had their chief brand officer on the podcast, Lori Lamb, a couple of years ago. Another business that's just on fire, 38% sales increase. Now, some of that is they did acquire Rhode, which is Hailey Bieber's brand. So it's both kind of organic growth plus that. But a number that really stuck out to me, again, despite tariffs, because they bring a lot of product in from China, 71% gross margin. Not too shabby. And so their EBITDA is growing nicely. I mean, this business is still comparatively small in the scheme of things, but really on fire. And then the last one, in a very different vein, I wanted to touch on just to kind of breeze through the earnings here, is Simon Property Group, the biggest mall operator in North America. They have been doing quite nicely for a while, and I guess proof that at least the top malls aren't dead or dying. Their revenue, so this is really lease payments, up almost 7%, 96.4% occupancy. They are also, they invested or remodeled the Southdale Mall in Minneapolis, which has two connections. Well, one's personal and one's not so personal. The Southdale Mall was by most measures, the first large enclosed mall in the United States. Secondly, I spent a disproportionate amount of time in the Southdale Mall because my ex-wife grew up in Edina, Minnesota, a mile from the Southdale Mall. So we spent some time there back in the day. But anyway, they've done a massive remodel, adding luxe boutiques, adding a hotel, adding residences. So kind of this playbook for re-envisioning the traditional mall that had a bunch of anchors, many of which have closed. So they bulldozed a JCPenney, have repurposed it. I haven't been to it, seen pictures of it. They're taking that formula now, and they're going to do 3 more of their malls, spending about $250 million, also in kind of traditional malls to re-envision them. So in Nashville, Cherry Creek Mall, in Denver, and the I think it's called the Tampa International Mall. 2 of the 3 happen to have Neiman Marcus stores, so we'll see how that all plays out, which brings me to my very last point on this is we also learned through the bankruptcy filings, something that I had not heard, that Simon Property was a $100 million investor in Saks Global. So on the one hand, they are probably not going to get most, if any, of that money back. I think this is another thing about maybe controlling their own destiny, because I think there's something like, I think about a third of the Saks and Neiman stores are in Simon malls. So maybe they had an interest in seeing this thing be successful. But they did get some clauses in there that they would get some of the buildings back in the event of the bankruptcy. So the one that I know about is the Stanford Mall out in Northern California. So whether that will continue to operate with some sort of different deal, but they are not going to get stuck, holding the short end of the stick on some of this. So.
All right. Well, that's a wrap on the news for this week. Now let's get to our interview with Jack Stratten and Kevin Ervin Kelley, and then we'll be back with the remarkable story of the week and what is on our radar screens.
Well, I am super excited to welcome 2 of the most remarkable minds in retail, Kevin and Jack, to the Remarkable Retail Podcast Studio. I should say the Narvar remote podcast studio.
Yeah, don't forget that.
Got to get the sponsor in here live from the NRF Big Show floor. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great to be here with you guys.
Great to have you.
It turns out, as much as you know each other by reputation and admire each other's work, I think you guys have not met in person. Is that right?
We have not.
No, this was very serendipitous. We've been messaging about meeting up at NRF, and then all of a sudden, an email from Steve Dennis arrives in my inbox. There's Kevin on the email thread. So yeah, it's you brought some fellow admirers together.
Well, that's what it's really about: building community, introducing people. It's like a matchmaking service, really, when it comes down to it. But well, we have a lot to talk about in a relatively short amount of time. So I'd love to jump in, but just to kind of help people understand who you guys are and what you do, maybe could each just take a little bit to tell our audience about who you are. Jack, you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So I am the Director of Insider Trends, Global Retail Trends and Insights Business. Best known for basically taking big global brands around different cities, showing them what's new, what's interesting, and inspiring them in terms of their new store development projects, changing stores, opening new stores. That's kind of our bread and butter.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, for people that haven't checked it out, your newsletter is fantastic. It's a real reference for
it means
me
a lot. Thank you, Steve.
all the time. So
100%.
Thank you.
All right, Kevin, who are you and what do you do?
I'm
A
Kevin
repeat
Kelley.
guest? First of all, a repeat guest on the
That's
pod.
right. And it was
Welcome
such
back.
a great podcast.
Welcome back.
My name's Kevin Kelley. I'm a behavioral design architect. We work primarily with retailers and helping them figure out why they're not attracting, convening people enough in their place. And so we help them increase dwell times, experimentation, frequency of visits by changing the environment. In short, our thesis is that environment affects behavior. And if you want a certain behavior, change the environment to cue and trigger the type of behaviors you want in store.
Excellent. Well, we're going to dig into a number of things, really trying to understand what is making stores remarkable today, leaning on some of both your thought process, but also a lot of the experience you have checking out stores and what you observe. But maybe just kind of start big picture with you, Kevin, as you think about, there's been kind of this narrative the last couple of years that physical retail is back. I don't think it ever went away, but it continues to evolve and change quite a lot. So when you think about what makes a physical space work and really stand out, what are some of the ways you approach that thought process?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I agree with you. It's hard to get up every day and read the headlines for the last 10 years, really. In the last 5 years, the retail apocalypse and everything's gone. And I remember when Amazon bought Whole Foods and they said, stores are dead, and click and collect is the only future.
It was a pandemonium on the stock market for grocery stocks, which was like a buy opportunity to me.
It dropped at 40%.
It was crazy.
It was
a crazy
unbelievable.
Day.
And so we had to really rethink our business and go, do we need to change? And is this true? And it wasn't true. We would look at store counts and all the issues we were talking about earlier about dwell times, experimentation. It just wasn't true. And so we built pretty heavy investment into physical stores right in the bottom of the pandemic, and some of those are doing better than any grocery store in the United States or retail stores in the United States. So what are we seeing out there? We're definitely seeing physical stores not competing on price, variety, or convenience anymore. Most of the leading edge retailers got the memo that you're just not going to win that war, and you got to let go of that contest. And you got to start focusing on other dimensions. And the other dimensions for us are the social opportunities that happen, the sense of community, the sense of meeting other people. So we're building bars and restaurants and doing all different types of things. So it is changing the reason you come to a store. But here's the more important part, is changing the relationship you have with a store, which is pretty exciting, because the relationship used to be get in and get out. But now people are saying, this is going to be my leisure activity. I go to work, I go to home, but I like to go shopping or on Main Street or High Street to experiment and to have fun.
Yeah. How about you, Jack?
I think that I'm going to take a similar vein. Let's just looking at grocery, and you could look at any kind of sector from my point of view. I think that it's about a complete commitment in terms of store design or store strategy, a complete commitment to the kind of customer and their goals and interests and needs. And what I mean by that is even within the same sector, to take grocery. I remember a few years ago, everything I read and everything I saw was about the optimization, the removal of friction through technology in supermarkets. This was as prominent in the UK, Asda, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, as it was in the US. The exact same time, I was aware of Trader Joe's, but not that aware. And suddenly, on a couple of trips in the US, I was going to Trader Joe's. And then I see these stores, and I'm told Trader Joe's is one of the fastest growing supermarkets in the US, and they have more than 500 stores. And I go, hang on a second, this is the most frictionful grocery store I think I've ever seen. And it dawned on me, it's not that there's one way of doing supermarkets or another, it's that there is a customer there that wants a super efficient shopping experience, and they go somewhere else. There's also a lot of customers who want to go to a supermarket that's got hand-painted signs and handwritten pricing labels and checkouts from the 1970s that makes you queue for ages. And people love Trader Joe's, people also love Walmart, and those two realities sit next to each other at once. And I think that's always what I'm aware of, is kind of maybe just sometimes removing my instincts of what I like and going, well, as long as it commits to a kind of customer and their goals and needs, you can do anything with a store if you hit that.
Yeah.
You know, it's super interesting. I had a conversation with Brian Hill from Aritzia, and we were talking about this, and you know, he was very caught up still, focused on the design of the store and the lighting. In fact, there's a picture of one of his stores on the screen. He goes, oh, that's an old picture. We moved that lighting 4 inches or something. So he's really into the details. But I said, you know, Brian, my experience, and probably yours, is as much as you try to create and wrap around this environment, you know, if a customer spends an extra minute in line, they lose their mind. So, you know, what him and his team are trying to figure out, and we're kind of really circling and getting right at it, is that mix of efficiency and frictionless when it counts. And how do you think of that, where you have a beautiful store, but when it's time to check out, I want to get out of this store and still maintain that brand essence of what they experienced?
Yeah, I think you in the book that we did, Irreplaceable, we really believe in dividing every aspect of a store into work payoff. So we're constantly looking at every moment going, how much work do I have to expend and what is my payoff? And so if I have to deal with a parking lot at Trader Joe's, that's a lot of work, but there's this really cool environment inside and this culture and this attitude and this kind of treasure hunting that's really exciting, and that has a big payoff for people. But I think when it comes to checkout, it's hard to find that payoff, and so we have to think about what is it, and there are a lot of other dimensions about what makes us stressed in those kind of situations. A lot of it is just social cooperation, or trying to check out if there's a line and I've got to stand in the line. So yes, we're not getting rid of convenience, and we're not getting rid of issues of price, but we're trying to figure out what else happens once we get those aspects fulfilled.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure.
And Jack, with you, there's a lot of discussion around self-checkout.
Yeah.
Right? And we were writing an article about the demise of self-checkout. It's being pulled, it's being yanked, it's here and it's there. So it feels like there's this tipping point of self-checkout where it works, and then when it doesn't. Trader Joe's famously has no self-checkout. They all want that full experience. How do you think about that? You know, can you walk and chew gum at the same time? Because it feels like it's not working every day.
The self-checkout thing for me is really, really complicated because I constantly see examples that work on both sides. So I really struggle to say that there's a clear future one way or another. It's about how it's executed, because a good example would be, so Uniqlo is still flying in Europe. Fashion-wise, fast fashion-wise, or store fast fashion-wise in the UK and across Europe, Uniqlo's doing better than anyone. And they've gone all in on RFID self-checkout. You've probably seen
bin,
it. Absolutely, checkout bin, you throw it in. It works beautifully. Yeah. Customers never questioned it, even though it seemed very futuristic, because it worked, it was fast, it was intuitive. They made these lovely signs that explained how to do it. Somehow it fitted with Uniqlo. At the same time, Primark are still doing pretty well. I chatted to Primark a year ago. They said, we're not going anywhere near self-checkout because we massively increase our basket at the checkout. And we think self-checkout removes the ability for us to put a load of other merchandise right next to it. So that is key, actually. We want a bit of friction at checkout so that we can... And there's two fast fashion retailers...
Slow people down a little bit.
Yeah,
and, you know.
Two fast fashion retailers in the same market doing very well with completely oppositional kind of approaches. So I think it is complicated. I should also caveat that I think self-checkout as a conversation, it is different Europe to the US. I think take-up seems a bit... There's less resistance in Europe to the US. I can't confidently say why that is, but it's grown a bit more comfortably, particularly in grocery. It's become a very normal part of UK grocery, for example. And I hear a lot of stories in the US of people just up in arms about self-checkout grocery. So I don't have an answer for why that is, but it's fascinating because it shows culture again.
It is fascinating because initially when I was talking about it to the media representing the industry, it was like you're taking jobs away, right? So it was defending that, no, we're just going to have people doing other things elsewhere in the store. And then it became, why would I do that work? Why are you offshooting that work to me? So I think there's some of the angst is the customer's like, hey, that's your job. Right. That's not my job. Yeah. That's your job. Kevin, I want to just, before I pass the mic to Steve, I want to wrap in retail media in stores. Yeah. So I was at an event yesterday. It's the next thing, I guess, because everybody's doing at some scale online. But in stores, it feels like very, very, we're at this inflection point where if you get too far down there, everybody's tried different things. How do you see a successful integration? Is there such a thing of retail media in stores?
I mean, what is exciting is that there's this realization that there's this captive audience in the store, right? Walking in the store and looking for ideas and solutions and inspirations to make their lives better and to solve family problems, health problems, other issues. That's exciting. Like a lot of things that we've done in the past, we'll go too far and we'll overwhelm the consumer. And there is a real physical state of information overload when our brain can't handle that. And that is my only fear. And it varies per type of store, but in grocery versus department versus retail store, if it's a grocery store, you'll tend to have every company trying to scream louder than the next company. And so that's the thing, is trying to get that circus make sense. But it's going to be a big growth market. I think self-checkout will eventually happen, but maybe not in the way we're talking. I'm jumping back to that. I think we can't ask people to interact with a calculus machine. We can't ask them to go up and work a DOS system again. They just don't want to do it. But we can help them in the cart. Some of the best solutions I've seen is just let me put the stuff in the cart and walk out. Now, that's pretty exciting. Now, imagine that tied into retail media, and that's what we've been seeing. But I think it'd be great if we didn't use the word ads, right? If we really want to if we really want to think about what is of value to the customer, and what's of value to the customers, give me insights, give me ideas. Think about it like a magazine, right? Why would I buy another magazine and they say 10 great grilling tips or the 15-minute exercise that'll save 5 years of your life? That's the kind of information I need in a store. But again, I fear that we'll go too far before we pull it back.
Warning to the audience and to you, I'm not sure I really know what my question is here, but I'm trying to understand how we blend technology, and I'll just say digital technology, with in-person, very human connecting kind of experiences. Do you have any general guidance? I mean, one thing I've said, people who listen to the podcast probably hear me say this, if I have a headache and I just need some aspirin, I just want the shortest point to get that. I don't need an experience, right? But in other cases, trying to put an outfit together or something like that, I may be much more interested in being in a store, taking my time. You guys have touched on this a little bit. But technology can be a huge enabler. So many transactions start in a digital channel, even if they end up in a physical store. So how do you think about that blend of digital, physical, self-service, with another person in formulating the strategy for stores? And I guess, what stores you see that maybe really bring this to life in a powerful way. Yeah.
There's a beauty retailer called Lyko in Sweden. Lyko are big in Scandinavia. They're like a Sephora. In some ways, in that region, they're much better than Sephora. They do some really incredible things. And actually, one of them is the integration of technology into experience. This is a store that just has 16-year-olds, coming to physical stores and spending a lot of time. So it is really succeeding. Massive flagship in the middle of Stockholm. What they do, they have all kinds of experiences and services, but with each of them, technology is integrated, and they allow brands who stock in that store to do something with those screens, but it has to be meaningful. So again, to Kevin's point, there's media, not advertising, but they play video, they give interesting tips, or the screen will be somehow linked to smelling a product or trying it on, or they'll let Dyson do some kind of a tutorial. It's not all perfect, but the strategic thing behind it is great, because what they're saying is, throughout this store, let's let the brands come in and do something that's tech-related, but it has to be related to this particular experience right now. It's not being kind of forced across the board. It's saying, you can have this tech if you can do something useful for the customer, something interesting. It's not perfect, but I like the strategy behind that. I think it's really, really good. And I haven't seen any beauty retailer do it better, actually.
I think it's important to divide problems up into different types of problems, and that we have problems that can be solved in very functional, utilitarian needs, like I need aspirin, I just need gas. But then I think of bigger problems like I'm divorced and I need to figure out a new look. I need to get myself back on the market, or I'm lonely. And these are
enough about me, Kevin.
Yeah. sorry, it was just that counseling session we had yesterday. Yeah. But these are, the money is in the complex problems. The functional problems is the first to go to commoditization. And if I'm in business, I really don't want to get into the commodity problems because they're just too simple. That doesn't mean some brands don't do that and they make a killing, but normally 2 to 3 do, and that's it. But it's the complex problems that are to me the most interesting. And technology can play a role in facilitating that, but ultimately you need to see a person and you need to talk to a person. And probably like a lot of you, we went on store tours this weekend here, some that we even did ourselves. Our firm did the new MoMA design store in Soho, and we needed help. And it's frustrating. You're like, how long is it going to take? And MoMA did a great job. I want to be clear, they did a great job, but we were other stores, and it was very frustrating when you couldn't see somebody. Now, when we're looking at how, we track behavior. When we look at consumers coming to a store, what we learn is the worst thing to do is approach them immediately. We find that they want to do some self-discovery in the beginning, and technology can play a role in that self-discovery. But there comes this moment where they're like, okay, you've helped facilitate my decision-making. Now I want to make a choice, or I need options, or I need the right size, or I need the container. I don't want to buy the model. I want to buy a new box. And so that to us is a very important as where are we solving that problem and how's technology doing that. There is one last thing I'd say on there is a big reaction that we're seeing, particularly among younger consumers, is they're being overwhelmed with technology, and they're actually wanting to go to places where they get a reprieve from that. And we're seeing that more and more.
That's interesting.
And they're saying, you know what, I want to go to somewhere where a detox, and the number of clubs and associations in place say no pictures, no recording, no cameras. This is changing everything.
I was just going to say, I read yesterday the average TikTok user spends 95 minutes a day. And I think something like they watch each clip for about 2-3 seconds. So it's a sort of mind-boggling level of digital saturation.
But, being a guy who grew up with television, is that just replacing, you'd watch the Flintstones and you'd watch an hour and a half of television? Like
TikTok shop is QVC.
But do you know the average time of social media has been dropping since 2019? This is not known as broadly out there, but people are using it less and less because of digital fatigue, performance culture, comparison culture. Our ability to say, hey, is this really serving my needs? And so some of the best stores are the ones that are giving you a different product. I think sometimes we get into this anti-technology, pro-technology, but I think that's the wrong framework. I think the framework is people want to go to a store to restore themselves and to rejuvenate themselves.
I like how you use restore. I like how I see what you did there.
It's Steve's next book, called Restore.
Today's episode is presented by Find Mine. Outfits, vibe, and trends are what your consumers eat up on social media. Are you capitalizing on them? Or do your experiences feel static or take too many hours to build and maintain? Listen to this. Find Mine delivers on-brand inspiration to over 100 million consumers every month. Lululemon and Ann Taylor use Find Mine's content engine to turn their catalogs into complete looks, better visual similar swaps, and on-trend programmatic ads, improving LTV, CAC faster than any other activation. Now, you can get live fast in as little as 1 week without enterprise contracts or waiting on a product backlog. Check them out at findmine.com. Jack, we're kind of circling around it. Often when we talk about trends that are affecting the retail landscape or the store landscape, we often just gravitate to technology first. We talk about RFID. Is there anything else you could call out that's top of mind for you that you're thinking about and that you're seeing out there?
Totally. Something that is kind of, it feels silly to call it a trend really, but it's just something fundamental that I say to all retailers is saturation. And I don't really mean that just as an online idea. I mean it as a simple idea, just saturation of everything. Consumption of retail, but actually consumption of media, everything, young people, but people of all ages. There's a level of kind of saturation in terms of the brands, the products, the marketplaces. And I say strategically, it's really good, I think, to try and design and plan retail strategies, stores, whatever they might be, with saturation as kind of the North Star, and go, whatever you're doing now, you are doing it in a world that is massively oversaturated with stuff. So if you look at it that way, I think it maybe sharpens the focus of, okay, what can we do that somehow doesn't just throw another thing on this massive heap of stuff? What can be slightly different in some way? Because this has been the case for ages, saturation, but it's just multiplying. And let's not ignore the fact that for all the good that AI can do, AI is a multiplier of saturation at its core. Much of the time, big brands will be using AI to repeat, duplicate, multiply that feed saturation.
50 images versus 3, kind of that amplification.
So with all of that happening, it's, for me, stores that kind of answer that question of saturation. And honestly, when I go around the world consistently, the best stores, whether it's a mass market concept or a niche concept, they're the ones that somehow find a home within that saturated world, distinct experiences within that. And I think people hear this a lot and think, it's like, there's a brand in France called Le Bon Brosse, that's called the good, translates as the good brush, and they literally sell hairbrushes for $250. Ridiculous business. And they're doing really well because it's the first of its kind. No one's ever sold a hairbrush for $250 before, so it's quite clever, I suppose.
I'm sad to say, I think we have one. My wife's around here somewhere. We have one of those.
There we go.
Well, you do have really nice hair, I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now that we're on camera.
Very well brushed. Very well brushed.
You are
for
good
sure.
looking. Question for you, and then I'll pass the mic to Steve, in terms of, I remember doing a store tour pre-COVID, early days, and we went into the Shinola store in Tribeca, and the big buzz around that store was, hey, there's a coffee shop in it.
Right.
And that kind of entertainment. And that kind of, I don't know if they set the trend, but now a lot of people have that, from Aritzia to whoever. Anything like that physical that you see coming or that you're seeing dominating the landscape? What's next?
We're seeing a whole lot of it, and we're seeing a lot of bad uses of it, too. I mean, we went to several stores just this weekend and saw coffee bars with nobody behind them. And the worst thing you want to do, and I think this ties in what Jack's saying, is that it's the thing you don't want to do is 50 things on a mediocre level. You want to do 2 or 3 things on a great level. And the consistent problem we see when we go into companies is they have all these new ideas they want to do, but they can't do 2 or 3 exceedingly well. And you need to really be really good at that. And running, we have a whole restaurant division in our firm, and it is a complex business. Running a restaurant is not casual. Even something as simple as a coffee shop, it is a nightmare in terms of mess and trash and detailing and loading and smells and
people.
Yes,
the people.
And our expectations are extremely high.
So,
but when you can do it well, it's working. And so what we have seen is a big rise of the stores hangout, the stores fort, the stores club. It does best when it has a community. When it's tied around an idea, and there are a lot of good brands doing that.
As opposed to kind of a gimmick, just a gimmick. We should have a
coffee bar.
Right,
and we see that all the time, and it breaks our heart. But there's some great brands doing community-based. Let's get together. Let's hang out. And in the old days of retail, we started worrying about people hanging out, and we kind of chased them away.
Yeah.
So now the idea is, how can we get them on the lot and get them to hang out? Because that gives us the traffic we need to get us the sales.
Sure.
I just want to really throw it super quickly for people. A great example of that, Buck Mason on Broadway. So, right? I mean, and
unbelievable. That was literally my example. Yeah.
Yeah. Coffee shop as a community builder in there. It's outstanding for anyone listening to check
But it
out.
ties into everything else they do, and that they have this aesthetic and this belief, and they would be one of the top. I think the next emerging leader brands out there. There's a couple others I would put in there, but I think Buck Mason's doing a phenomenal job.
Excellent. Well, I guess I know who we're going to invite on the pod next.
You should.
So just to bring this home, and we have a global audience, but I also imagine quite a lot of people will have been at the NRF Big Show and maybe checked out some of the flagship stores or new concepts here. We don't want to try to run through a big list, but you mentioned Buck Mason, you mentioned a couple others. Are there one or two that we haven't talked about yet that you think, if people are in New York or they have an opportunity maybe to see one of their stores elsewhere, that are really worth seeing? And what is it? Not to copy necessarily, because I think about Printemps, Target's got a new store. There are a lot of things that people will go like, I don't know what that has to do with my store. But what is the thing to look for when you go to some of these flagship stores, and which ones would you say, boy, if you just come here, go there?
We'll take it 10. So I'd start with a real surprise space since I've been here, 113 Spring, which is kind of part wellness experience, part sort of beauty store in Soho, but really, really great because it does that thing that doesn't happen often in retail, where you walk in and you don't really know whether this is a shop or some kind of hangout / place to just chill out and experience something. They have this kind of meditation experience you pay for, a little cafe in the back. But what's really interesting is because of kind of blurring the lines between, service experience, hospitality, shopping, the very obvious consequence is that people go and they sit down and they spend a lot of time there, learn about the brand, and probably before you know it, they're actually shopping, buying things. I think it's very, very interesting conceptually, even for bigger brands who just want to look at what happens when you start to blur the lines between, retail and other things.
Yeah, as somebody who spent their whole life designing stores, I think what I am constantly finding myself trapped between just completely low utilitarian functional stores that are emotionally dead on one level, and then the over-the-top impractical store. And I hate that we live in these two extremes constantly. Yeah. And what we really need to
Are we talking about politics now or store design?
We need to really look at who's got their finger on the pulse of right in the middle, who really understands. Buck Mason, we talked about, I think they've got their finger on the pulse of something really exciting that is both aspirational yet reachable. You can afford it and do it. I think Todd Snyder is just kicking butt. I mean, he really has, that brand has got their finger on the pulse of what's happening. Yes, it's mass market. Yes, it's not over-the-top expensive quality material, but he's doing something that's right on the pulse. And I think everybody else is trying to nibble around the edges, and they keep falling on one side. I mean, I like Kith. It's just a little over the top, and it's a little too self-conscious.
There's a big line up there yesterday.
It's a great store.
Yeah,
it's a great store to see.
Right.
But it just, in terms of scalability, and then they don't want to scale. But I think it's fascinating to see who's really succeeding right in the middle. If we were writing a movie or writing an album, we want to sell albums, and who's going to have a hit? I think Todd Snyder and Buck Mason are going to have a hit.
Yeah, I love that. And I actually would add that I didn't expect to like Nespresso in Flatiron as much as I did, but thought it was great. Thought it was really ambitious. I think it's their biggest boutique. But again, to Kevin's point, it's a big brand, big business with a hell of a lot of boutiques around the world. And actually, they've done something quite bold there, but actually still with a hell of a lot of product. Lots of very familiar things, but then also like a kind of speakeasy, coffee, cocktail bar, some really odd things. But they're kind of on the edge of this fundamentally good shopping experience as well. They've merged both things really well there, so I'd recommend checking that out in Flatiron.
Did either of you guys stop into the Tecovast store? Do you know that brand?
Yes. I love it. Yeah. I love it, and growing up in the South, I mean, they're capturing, and it seems like anybody with a point of view and a rich and robust field of meaning is succeeding right now. Because that's what people are, because we talked about Buck Mason, and they use artifacts. They use cars and motorcycles to bring people in. There's another brand called Ether. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Very good brand, and they'll bring in full dune buggies and BMW motorcycles, but they take you on an adventure, and that's what we're seeing younger people are looking for.
It's like the Yeti store in Austin, right? The flagship is
fantastic.
Boats and cars and trucks and all kinds of things.
I mean, what's kind of exciting is the merging. I'm sorry, Stephen. Just the merging of. You hit the word earlier, but there is this sense of hangout and community, but also wellness is coming in, value-based. People are trying to, not price value, but what's your point of view and where do you land? Again, I really would encourage people to think of what are the popular television shows right now, and Taylor Sheridan is doing all these Western-themed shows because it's got a territory. It's traditional.
It's a tie to the culture, right?
And so that's what I think is really exciting.
Yeah. Yep. So one final question, a piece of free advice, but what this discussion made me think about, a number of the brands that I would say we talk about and admire, a number that you brought up, their advantage, I guess you could argue, is they have a relatively narrow customer base, and then they go very deep. So many retailers, and this is a whole other podcast probably, but you have so many retailers that have cast too wide a net, but they're not special enough. But if you're one of those retailers, that's maybe sort of stuck in this murky middle, or maybe not, close, how short, and they've got a big store base, maybe their stores are too large to do something. How do they move? Is there something they can do with their existing store base that's not a complete rethink of their business model? So I don't know. That's probably something you usually charge, a few $100,000 for.
Well, it's kind of what Target did in their Soho stores. Yeah. It's like, we're just going to put in this completely different experience. That was maybe an attempt to do something. I don't know.
Yes. Yeah, you go first, Kevin.
I feel like, because I love all stores, and I love, being older. I love the department store and where it was at. But I have to question whether the multi-dimensional brand approach is going to work, where you can buy $300 purse and a $40,000 purse. I just think it's too much for consumers to hold nowadays. And so I think you have to own a really strong, powerful idea and be the headquarters for that idea. And that can allow you to have multiple brands and a bigger approach. But I think right now Google has taught us one thing. There's an expert on something, right? And AI is going to even double that down. And consumers are pressed for time, and they're like, who is the expert in sleeping? Who is the expert in back pain? Who is the expert in trail riding? And so I just don't think this multi-dimensional brand, I think it was during an era when we had we had more demand than supply. Now we have an oversupply of stores, not enough demand.
I think particularly to big brands, my advice at the moment would be and it goes back to something Kevin said earlier a little bit, to try as hard as it is to resist the temptation to do too many things and focus on one or two really clear, simple goals and get a team on that goal and commit to it absolutely. Because when you see these smaller D2C, whatever we're calling them, brands, actually when they create good experiences, it's normally because they don't have much complexity within that business. So Le Bon Bros, I mentioned them earlier, but their stores are quite good because all they're doing is trying to convince the customer you should spend $250 on that brush. When all your creative energy in a store goes into that one idea, you're good at doing it.
Well, and it's also clear that this is for a very select number. Like there's plenty of people like, this is clearly not for me because I'm never spending $250 on a brush. And then like, I don't know, maybe I need a $250.
You guys were talking about Yeti, right?
Yeah,
Yeti owned a narrow bench, but they can go far with that now.
Completely. And on the flip side to this, a better way of explaining my point is if you look at, there's a new Puma flagship in London on Oxford Street. It's great, it's really nice, but also it's a little bit like walking into a kind of sort of top 12 of the blogs I might have written in the last 2 years, because it's just trend after trend after trend being hit. There's a bit of service, there's a bit of tech, there's some experience, there's everything in every corner of the store is a different idea. All interesting. As a customer, it would be completely disorienting and overwhelming.
Jarring, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't really know what it's trying to do. Versus, again, there isn't for me no better example than something like, who's doing it really well. It's hard as Kevin says, in a kind of multi-product world, but committing to one kind of idea. It's actually why I did quite like Prontom in New York, because I know it's a mini department store and it's kind of able to do things differently, but actually you can tell they committed 100% just to the idea of let's make something so spectacular looking that everyone is going to take photos and talk about it.
I thought it was a good story.
And they did commit to that.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't think there's necessarily that much to learn for chain department stores. They can't do that in every store. Having said that, they commit to the idea of the most beautiful store you've probably seen in recent history, and therefore they do it because of that commitment to one goal, make a beautiful store. So that would be my big advice, just focus on one idea.
Well, gentlemen, it's been such a treat to host you here in the Narvar podcasting studio and to bring you two together.
Yeah,
that was really super fun. If people need to get a hold of you or want to get a hold of you, dive more into that wisdom that was in your book, Kevin, how do they get in touch?
You can look me up at Kevin Kelley at shookkelley.com. Kelley's K-E-L-O-E-Y, and buy the book Irreplaceable.
And Jack, you have blogs and a newsletter. You got to subscribe if you're in this business. If you're not, how do people find it?
Thank
and
you.
How do they get you?
LinkedIn and Substack, but LinkedIn really, I sort of endlessly share everything there.
Endlessly and wonderfully, I would
Thank
say.
you.
Well, listen,
I agree.
On behalf of Steve, thanks so much for joining us on the Remarkable Retail Podcast. Real treat.
Thank you so
both.
much.
And I love your podcast.
Oh, same. Massive
Amazing.
privilege.
It's
Thank you.
great. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
All right, we are back. Let's talk about Remarkable Story of the Week.
So there was a story last week that grocery e-commerce penetration, which historically, as many people would know, has been a big laggard, had reached 20%. And we also saw, I don't think we talked about it on the pod, there have been a couple stories in recent months that online grocery was growing like 30+% year over year, which is a big change from the historical trajectory. I'm not sure I completely buy that, but I do think there is a lot of evidence that online grocery is kind of meeting the moment and getting a lot of growth. Part of the reason why I'm skeptical of the numbers is you can look at what the top grocers or the people with big grocery businesses like Walmart, say about their overall e-commerce growth. And it's very hard to believe that the big if the big players are growing more like 15 to 20%, it's kind of hard to see how the total could be over 30%, particularly like, Trader Joe's and some others have very tiny e-commerce businesses. So anyway, I'm skeptical. I think that was derived from some survey or something, not actual data. You can look at the Census Bureau data and, it just doesn't quite add up. But I do think we are seeing a very significant growth there. And with the news of Amazon's really focus on the fresh part of this, and they being such a big player already, that's definitely an accelerant. And there's no question that Walmart has been emphasizing that as well. Costco has a decent sized grocery business. Their e-commerce business has been growing very quickly. Kroger has been growing very quickly. So anyway, I think we really are, it's sort of flattened out post-COVID, and now there does seem to be a reacceleration. Now, a lot of folks talk about the lack of profitability in doing grocery online. In fact, Walmart has said they just overall in e-commerce are maybe breaking even. And with grocery being such a high balance of sale, that's got to be an issue. Kroger has said they may reach profitability online next year. So maybe people have gotten to the point where they've worked out enough of the efficiency that they feel like they can step on the gas a little bit, whereas before it was just mostly an opportunity to light a big pile of cash on fire. So things in the underlying economics seem to be shifting.
My story is a little connected to results, actually. Canada Goose put out their results last week, and their results were not terrible. I mean, compared to what the results you were sharing for some of the other players, they were not great. And their stock just got pummeled. It was the worst stock of the day in North America. It dropped like 20%. Now, fun factoid, I am a holder of Canada Goose stock, so it was not a great day for me, though.
Sorry.
To be fair, I've bought and sold Canada Goose a bunch of times. I've done well with them. They're back up already this week, 5-6%. So Carrie Baker, who we've had on the show, was talking about their mix and the shift in their mix, because you can't just be this big cold weather retailer.
Right.
And they're just walking this really interesting, look, these aren't big stores. We can't have a plethora. We can get over skewed really, really quickly if we're not careful. So I think they're doing a good job of expanding their line in the right directions, but they took a hit on their profitability, and the market really, really punished them. And I guess in the context of what you were talking about earlier in the results, where there's some really good positive results, theirs were just sales grew, but profit did not. So they really got punished for it.
Yeah.
What's on your radar screen?
Again, we're not an investment podcast. What I really noticed this past week, of course, is just tons of market volatility. It doesn't seem like it takes much to get people to bail out of some of the high flying birds, which is largely the AI related, either negatively affected potentially like by AI, like some of the software as a service kind of companies, because people think, if people can create their own apps or what have you, why do you need Salesforce? And so there's been people bailing out of that. And then just in general, like I said earlier, this concern about this arms race, where only one or two people might end up winning, and how is this all going to work out? And at what point do people take their foot off the accelerator and not be burning through so much cash? So, obviously there can be some ripple effects in terms of the wealth factor and the influence that has on people's spending, particularly on the higher end. Crypto's been, Bitcoin crashed basically.
Tough. Yeah. Right.
So anyway, does this generally make people a little bit more nervous about spending, or does it have a direct through line to, hey, I feel a lot less wealthy whether it's on paper or because they've got to bail out of some of these stocks. So I think it's just something to watch. I don't like to try to predict the market, but there's, I think, no question the volatility has really gone up a lot in just the last week or two.
Mine is slightly correlated to that. I've been watching closely the price of silver and its impact on Pandora Jewelry. Now, I worked for Pandora Jewelry here in Canada, and they're a massive jewelry company. They've had a lot of headwinds. All the products made in Taiwan, wonderful, wonderful places in Taiwan. They have beautiful facilities there, employ thousands of people with wonderful jobs, but they've been hit by tariffs coming into America. And now they go from affordable luxury to, at the price of silver, it's really bumping their price or hitting them in the gross margin. So they're doing a shift to platinum. And why it's on my radar screen is because their biggest week is coming up, right? Their Christmas, so to speak, is Mother's Day. And Mother's Day is right around the corner. They're trying to shift really quick to forces that are fairly beyond their control. They do a pretty good job in many other things. So I'll be watching to see how that turns around for them, if it turns around for them for their big Mother's Day event. All right, well, that's a wrap on this show.
Thanks for tuning in. To help more retail leaders discover the industry's leading podcast, please drop us that 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy your pods. And for more on my strategic advisory services, keynote speaking, best-selling books, and even more retail industry insights, go to StephenPDennis.com.
If you are a brand or service provider looking to take your influence to the next level, reach out to us for sponsorship, advertising, or event partnerships. And if you want to learn more about my own keynote speaking and advisory practice, reach out to me via LinkedIn.